Dave has one of those very, very important questions. So let's get into it. Dave says, I don't drink, but I smoke weed sometimes. If I'm pulled over and they give me a blood test and marijuana shows up, would they arrest me for DUI, even if I hadn't smoked that day? All right, Bubba. Can we do blood tests, first of all, on the side of the road, or what would lead to that? Then let's get into his question.
Well, in Arizona, they do them on the side of the road, but at the same time, if the person does what I ask and remains silent and you haven't admitted smoking anything, unless you have it actively going in the car and the officer can smell it, there'd be no reason to suspect that. But you're going to be asked questions that the officer is just on a fishing expedition. Have you had anything to drink? Are you taking any medication? Have you smoked any dope? All you have to do is say my name and my address. That's it. So if you don't talk and you don't admit anything, how is the officer going to get enough probable cause to ask you to go have your blood drawn? So you have to have a blood test in Georgia to test for marijuana. But if you have been smoking and you take a blood test, it's going to show whatever's in your system at that time. Marijuana is not like alcohol. Alcohol will be out of your system within 24 hours generally, unless you're above a 3.6. But on marijuana, if you're a heavy marijuana user, you could have smoked nothing in the last 3 days. But if you smoked something heavy for the 30 days before, it's going to be in your system for about 90 days. And whether or not it's going to have a level of psychoactive marijuana metabolites or not, I don't know. But heavy smokers, if they are given a blood test, are going to show indications of smoking marijuana. And the law in Georgia says no marijuana, none. So again, you may have the inactive metabolites in your system, and those cases we can usually negotiate because again, you're not impaired whatsoever. The metabolites show no psychoactive marijuana. But again, smoking marijuana and admitting it is going to get a blood test and you're going to have a DUI arrest and you're going to need an attorney.
Okay.
So, Morgan, Marty? I would add to that. I think those are important issues to consider that Bubba was talking about with the evidentiary issues. I'll add one way that does come up that we've seen and what we do in the injury practice is if someone is involved in an accident and they get taken to the hospital, a lot of times the hospital, especially if they're unconscious or there's evidence of some kind of head injury where they're not coherent, hospital will do a blood test to make sure they're not giving you any medication that may counteract or affect you based on what's in your system. Now, that wouldn't be, may not be admissible in a criminal proceeding like Bubba was talking about with the DUIs, but it is something we often use on the personal injury side of things because like Bubba said, any marijuana in your system in Georgia is too much. So if they take your blood at the hospital, then we can use forensic toxicologists to look at those tests and determine whether or not there's evidence, and they can testify in a civil proceeding, which is a different level or standard of evidence than a criminal proceeding. So it does come up in those situations. It might not lead to a criminal consequence for you, but it certainly could lead to some liability exposure.